They are a proven team in the Big 12 year after year. But this year, I've watched them many times. I've watched them against NAIA teams. I've watched them play their games at Michigan State. They lost to Michigan State this year. I kind of forgot who that other loss came to, but it was not very close. I don't think Baylor passes the eye test to me. They look like they, as a athlete, take that for what it is through high school and stuff. They seem like the type of team that thinks they're just going to win every game and that they don't have to prove it night after night. And I think they're going to struggle in the Big 12. What I think is they're going to have going for them is they're going to be playing teams like UCF, Cincinnati that are new and they're not used to this kind of tough Big 12, and it's going to keep them afloat. They're going to keep winning games. But when it's all said and done, I see Baylor finishing the 5-6 mark in this conference, and I see a team like Texas Tech rising above them. So that's my take on Baylor.
Well, good deal. Any closing thoughts on the Big 12 before we move to our final Power 6 conference? Well, all right, let's get to the ACC. Last and definitely not least, the Atlantic Coastal Conference. Here we got the Tar Heels, you got the Blue Devils, and so we're going to talk about that conference right now. And leading the pack are those Tar Heels of North Carolina at 11-3, 3-0 in conference play. Wake Forest is 11-3, 3-0 in conference play. NC State 11-3, 3-0 in conference play. Duke 11-3, 2-1 in conference play. Miami 11-3, 2-1 in conference play. Florida State 8-6, 2-1 in conference play. Virginia 11-4, 2-2 in conference play. Clemson 11-3, 1-2 in conference play. Virginia Tech, the Hokies, 9-5 overall, 1-2 in conference play. Syracuse 10-4, 1-2 in conference play. Boston College 10-4, 1-2 in conference play. Georgia Tech 8-6, 1-2 in conference play. Pitt 10-5 overall, 1-3 in conference play. Notre Dame 6-9, 1-3 overall in conference play. And in last place, to Nick's dismay, is the Louisville Cardinals at 5-9 overall and 0-3 in conference play. So I'm going to turn it over to you, Nick. I'm going to throw it to you. Tell us about what surprised you in the ACC so far, what hasn't been, what's impressed you, and what's disappointed you.
Yeah, so the biggest things to me that stand out are the first main storyline. Nothing about the ACC has changed in the last 2 or 3 years. It's been one of the weakest Power 6 conferences probably since the pandemic, because before then it was pushing the Big 10 and the Big 12 as the best power conference. And then suddenly, there were teams like Louisville, there were teams like Syracuse and Virginia that fell off a little bit and really hurt the pedigree of the conference. I think this conference has 3 tiers of teams that are contending for NCAA tournament berths, and then the rest of the conference is not going to be competitive when it comes to March. I think you have a clear top team right now, unless proven otherwise. I would say North Carolina is the clear favorite in this conference. They have a few close losses, UConn, Kentucky, Villanova, but they haven't been thoroughly outplayed by any of these teams. And when it comes to March, they're as dangerous as any team. I think the second best team in this conference right now is Duke. A lot of people hyped them up coming into the season. They were one of the title favorites, and they, outside of one bad loss at Georgia Tech early in ACC play about a month ago, they've looked pretty solid. I don't want to say elite because they're not among the elite teams right now, but they could potentially push UNC and give them a run for their money for the conference title. And then I think there's a third tier when it comes to contending for March Madness bids. I'd say Miami, Virginia, and Clemson are 3 through 5 right now, unless proven otherwise. And those teams I would put in my field right now for the NCAA tournament. But when it comes to 6 through 15, I don't think any of those teams are particularly competitive, and it's just going to be a crapshoot as to where they finish 6 through 14. with maybe even 6 through 13, because I think there's a real battle. One of the more underrated matchups in Power Six. I think Notre Dame and Louisville will be competing for the bottom slot in the conference. Two of the worst Power Six teams. I could harp on Louisville for a while. It's just really, as a fan, it's disheartening to see what's happened to the program. I guess like the apathy around the program, because Louisville is one of those programs that is like should be mentioned in the same breath as programs such as UConn, Villanova, Indiana, contending for Final Fours, Elite Eights every year, and they're the worst Power Six team, maybe with the exception of DePaul. And we'll have a lot to talk about, for their coaching search. Kenny Payne obviously going to get fired at the end of the season. He's not shown any signs of coaching pedigree or any sort of signs of life for that program. But when it comes to the top teams in the ACC, I like UNC. Duke could potentially push them if they figure things out. They're a pretty young team, with the exception of Kyle Filipowski, and then that second or third tier, whatever you want to call it, with UVA, Clemson, and Miami. I think Miami's been a little bit disappointing this year. I'll say that. But otherwise, really, the ACC is probably the least significant of the Power Six conferences right now, and I think most would agree. There isn't really a big storyline outside of. I think the biggest storyline is probably just Louisville being as bad as they are right now.
Well, I think you're right about that. Louisville definitely should not be down in the worst of Power Six, players. So, it's just depressing to see what's happened with them. And I will say, a team that got fraud checked that I thought would, because I didn't think they were that good, is Clemson. Now, I'm not going to say they're bad, but I didn't think they were that good. They started off 11-1, fell to Miami, giving up 95 points. That's a tough one, and lost to North Carolina by 10, which was better than I thought. I don't think this is a very good team. I really don't. I know Ken Pom thinks they are. I just don't really see it with them. I think they'll be a 500 team, maybe a little bit better. But that may be a little bit of a hot take there, but I don't think Clemson's going to be all that. But yeah, I think this the conference, like you said, it's ran by the same teams every year, so not much more to expect out of the ACC for that.
Well, one thing we've touched on, we haven't touched on yet, that I'd like to just briefly, that is not necessarily very relevant to who's going to win the ACC, because I think Nick's absolutely right when he outlines the tiers there. But one thing we haven't looked at is moving towards the bottom is Virginia has been immensely disappointing. And I am always just bored to tears by the brand of basketball that Tony Bennett insists on playing, which is basically just, we're going to score a little over 50 points, and if we can beat you with that, then great. He slows the game down. He makes it horrible to watch. And, he's had success with it, so I can't necessarily fault it. And Payne knows more than anyone about the success he's had, as do any other Auburn fans here. But I've always hated when they were good, and I had to watch that crap in March, and so I really don't mind that that's not looking like it's going to be an issue this year.
Well, before I have already made my comments. Jackson, you got anything to say on the ACC, or you want us to move forward?
Move forward. Conference is trash outside of the Blue Bloods right now. So
I think we can all agree with that. And with that, we finally move on out of the Power Six, and we get to our mid-majors. We won't be on here very long, guys, but do not worry. Mid-majors get the love. And we'll start off with the WCC. Yes, it is a mid-major, no matter what Gonzaga wants to say. Will Gonzaga run the WCC? They kind of had a slow start. It looked like they were going to get unranked there. Conference play has begun, and Gonzaga, of course, has ran that conference for years now under Mark Few. I'll take over with this one to begin. They're 2-0, but they played a pretty they lost to Purdue. They lost to Washington, which was very surprising. They lost to UConn and they lost to San Diego State. I didn't know how good this team really was, but since WCC conference play has began, they played the mighty Pepperdine and they obliterated the Waves, RIP, and they destroyed San Diego yesterday. So I think this is Gonzaga's conference. I really thought last year St. Mary's was going to win it. And I love Randy Bennett as a coach. I really do. They've just been really disappointing this year at 11-6. They lost to Missouri State, who is a very good mid-major. Watch out for them in March. Lost to Boise State, who's also a fine mid-major. They lost to Utah, which they probably shouldn't be losing to Utah. But the Gales have been a little disappointing in my eyes. After last year, they went 27-8 with victories over the Bulldogs of Gonzaga. So I think this is still Gonzaga's conference no matter what. I'll read you off the standings. It's not as long as the other ones. Gonzaga, St. Mary, Santa Clara are both tied in first with a 2-0 conference record. The Zags at 11-4, St. Mary's 11-6, and Santa Clara at 11-6. San Francisco, the Dons 12-4, 1-0. Portland is 7-9, 1-0. Loyola Marymount 7-9, 0-2, kind of falling back after a pretty good year last year. San Diego 10-7, but 0-2 in conference play. Pepperdine, what has happened to y'all? 7-10, 0-2. And Pacific out of Stockton, California. The Tigers are 6-11 and 0-2. So, guys, I know this one won't be much of a discussion, but do you think any team can contend with Gonzaga this year? Last year we saw St. Mary's push them pretty well, but is it the year for the Dons?
I think there's only two teams that have a chance, and that's Santa Clara and St. Mary's. Sadly, neither of those two teams are very good. This conference will not get a auto bid. Or sorry, they will get an auto bid. You know what I mean, though. They're not bringing in anybody besides a conference champion unless Gonzaga's somehow to lose. This is their conference. I really wish they were in the Big 12. That's all I'm going to say.
I would also love to see Gonzaga in the Big 12 just for the chaos that it would bring. I feel like I've talked to each of y'all about this at some point. Seeing UCF have to fly to Spokane on a Wednesday night in February would be hilarious just from a logistical standpoint. It would be so stupid, but I would be here for it. It would be like a 9 p.m. Central tip-off, and then UCF's going to have to fly back down to Orlando right after that. I just think it'd be hilarious.
Yeah, to go back to your question there, TP, the short answer is no. No one can compete with Gonzaga in the WCC. Every year we ask this, and every year it turns out the same way. The Dons are good. They have a shot at maybe an at-large bid if they hold serve against Gonzaga at home. But I mean, and this is also the reason why Gonzaga never has the success they're expected to in the tournament, is because they're not tested. The conference occasionally has a couple teams that can maybe beat Gonzaga, but they're a high enough quality program with a high enough quality coach and good enough players that they just don't struggle with the bottom half. And as a result, they don't improve as much as teams that are going through the gauntlets of the Big 12 or the Big 10 do. So, yeah, my answer is no. I would be betting the farm on Gonzaga to win the WCC. Absolutely.
Well, I will propose this question to y'all because it got brought up. Gonzaga to the Big 12. I'm going to ask each one of y'all. You can jump in as you will. Let's say that you are now the AD of the Zags. Congratulations. Do you move? You get an invitation from the Big 12. Do you move Gonzaga with all your sports? Do you move them to the Big 12 or